crypto pirates. Welcome to your Discourse Syndicates Chattin with the Captain. I am the Captain RG3, and I'll be bringing you a special guest tonight. Believe it or not, this is kind of just a coincidence, but it is actually 1 year to the date that we had Mr. G Edward Griffin on our show. It was May 9th, or it was May 10th of last year that he actually came on and graced us with his presence. So tonight, without any further, I got to get into this, but hey, thank you everybody for coming. Appreciate you all. I don't want to take up too much of his time and keep him waiting. So we're going to answer some of your questions, get him on. There's something important I want to talk to him about. But for those of you who may not know, and if you are, you've been under a rock for the last 20 years. But Mr. Griffin is the author of Jekyll Island, the creature from Jekyll Island, and also the founder of Freedom Force International. So without any more delay, I'm going to bring up friend of the show now, Mr. G Edward Griffin. How you doing, sir? Can you hear me? Sir, can you hear me? How you doing? I think we've got a sound problem. Can you not hear me? Maybe it's me. Let me find out. Can you hear me, chat room? Let me see if everybody can hear me. I've got my audio live. Hold on one second. Let's see what everybody's saying. Hold on. No sound. You can hear me. Everybody can hear me. So I think it's on your side. Let me go to the private chat here real quick. Let's see. They can hear.
All right, I can hear you now.
Oh, there you are.
Yes,
You're
with
us.
Yes.
How you doing, sir? Good to see you again.
Well, thank you. Boy, you've got quite a production here on your show.
Yeah, the thing is, things have changed a little bit since the last time you came. We were doing green screens and whatnot, but now we've gone full production. Got the set up now. Bringing on lots and lots of guests from the financial world and the crypto world. And yeah, things are moving and shaking. How about you? What have you been up to?
Things are going well with me. I've been had a little illness, left me kind of breathless. So if I have to gasp for air to speak, you'll understand it's not fatal, I don't think, but it just means I'm a little short of breath. But I think I'll be fine. My biggest problem will be thinking of something to say.
Well, I don't think we're going to have a problem with that because I've got a bunch of stuff to talk to you about. But first, what I'd like to do is so some of the people, a lot of our audience, a lot of the people have heard of you and have read your book and are very excited to have you on the show. But if you would just give us an introduction, who you are, the book, where it came from, and what you've been doing since you wrote the book. I know there's been a bunch of revisions but maybe you could just give everybody just a quick synopsis of what this is, what your book is all about.
Well, I guess you're talking about the creature from Jekyll Island.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's the one that's made me more infamous or popular, depending on your point of view. Well, okay. Who am I? My name is Ed Griffin, and I am. I guess I am just. The way to describe me is I am a born researcher and writer. I didn't know that until fairly late in life. When I went to school, I didn't read books. I hated reading books. They were dull and boring. It wasn't until after I graduated from the university that I thought I've read my first real history book, the one that intrigued me. It was written by Harold Lamb, who was a historian who wrote history in a very interesting way, because he relied mainly on the active writings of the people who participated in that history, instead of filling everybody with a lot of hot air about, well, this meant that and that meant this and then this happened. He was very strong on letting the players, the actors themselves, describe their emotions and their feelings and the drama of the events of history. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting stuff. That was the beginning of my changeover. And by now I'm a book addict. I have probably about 5,000 books, most of which I have read. I mean, I don't read the encyclopedias, for example, and the reference books, but I do use them once in a while.
We have Google for that now.
You have Google to tell us what to think on that. So I became an avid reader, avid researcher, and a writer. And it's a boring story. I just started to write about things that I thought were important, and not intentionally, but I found myself discovering that I was on the upstream side of many issues in the world. Seemed like the more important the issue it was, the more misinformation there was out there on it that I was able to discover when I really dug into it. So I started to write things about geopolitics. I wrote a book called World Without Cancer, which had to do with the very, very sick health industry and the fraud in particularly the cancer industry. I discovered that the cancer is not something to be afraid of, that you don't have to have cancer. The body is designed to overcome cancer if only you can give it the right things. And that's true, I found out later, on many levels of health. The body is the thing that heals, but it's like a car. It needs gasoline. You can't put water in the tank and expect it to run the car. So I became kind of a health nut at that point, realizing that the food I ate was probably more important by far than the medicines I took. So I wrote about that, and then I discovered the Federal Reserve System. I thought, boy, I thought the health industry was sick, and I discovered that the banking industry is
the money was sicker, huh?
The money was thicker, and it's not at all what people thought. It wasn't what I thought it was. So I wrote a book about the Federal Reserve System. I was probably the least qualified person on the planet to do that because I had no schooling on it. I've been told by quite a few bankers since then that was an advantage because I didn't have to unlearn some things. I could just sort of start with a clean slate. So as in most topics, it was an upstream topic. Most people have a reverence for the Federal Reserve because they erroneously think that it's part of the federal government. They erroneously think that it's run by people who have our best interest at heart. And erroneously, it's thought everything about it is just the opposite of what people think it is. So I wrote this book on the Federal Reserve called The Creature from Jekyll Island. And that's so named because the Federal Reserve was conceived in its earliest stages on Jekyll Island. Jekyll Island is off the coast of Georgia, and it was a privately owned island in those days. It's now open to the public, but in those days it was privately owned by people such as, the Rockefellers and JP Morgan and people like that, the very wealthy elite families. And they all had what they called cottages on this island. And you could go there and visit those cottages today. And you'll see that most of them are 14 to 22 room homes, estates, and
cottages.
And they held a meeting, a private meeting, a very secret meeting. They traveled in secret. They lied to everybody about where they were going. They wouldn't tell anybody they were going to a meeting where they were going to draft the legislation that would create the Federal Reserve System. And they couldn't tell anybody, of course, because the whole purpose of the Fed, according to what most people thought, was to control those big bad bankers. Well, if the public had known that the control mechanism for the big bad bankers was designed in every detail by the big bad bankers, why the cat would have been out of the bag. So it was a very secret meeting. And so when I discovered that they went to great lengths to keep it a secret and lied about it for quite a few years and didn't admit the truth until after it was way too late, the Federal Reserve by this time was created. The American public thought it was a wonderful organization. It funded World War I and II. I mean, fiat money and all that sort of thing. So that's the short version, and it's the things I write about are fascinating. but my involvement in it is very boring. You just do a lot of reading and asking questions and writing a lot of papers, crumpling them up, throwing them away. That was no good. So that's the short version.
But you're the man that tripped over the rabbit hole that everybody's been following you down. So you're actually the originator of the rabbit hole, which makes me, proud and honored to actually speak with you because this community here, especially the crypto community, these guys have all been in the rabbit hole and been digging in it. So when you did trip over this thing, what was there an aha that made you continue? What was that one thing that made you go, what the heck is this? What is going on here? Because I mean, it sounds so far-fetched, and now we all know, we understand, we've done all the research with the emperor has no clothes anymore, but you tripped over it. What was that one thing that you found that kind of took you on this journey of discovery? I mean, this is so secretive, and all these very wealthy elitists that secured this thing. How did you find it?
Well, I've already mentioned it. Actually, it was the secrecy of that meeting, that founding meeting. It was, they traveled in the dark of night. They got on a private railroad car. It was very few wars of history have been conceived under conditions of greater secrecy than this meeting. And that intrigued me. I thought, when people have secrecy, it's usually something to hide. And I wanted to know what it was. And it was hard to discover. I knew that they were creating the Federal Reserve, but I knew nothing about what the Federal Reserve really did. I thought, like everyone else, I thought it was an agency of the federal government. And then I found out that no, that's not it at all. It's a cartel. It's a cartel, just like the banana cartel or the peanut cartel, the oil cartel. It's privately owned, and it's shared by the largest stakeholders in their industries. And they form cartels in order to avoid competition and control the industry, pricing, product distribution, sharing of patents and processes, and all that sort of thing, and to enhance their profits and to sock it to the consumer and give the consumer no option because they created a monopoly, but it's a shared monopoly. And I had all of these things to learn. These are the things I learned on the road or on the way down the rabbit hole, you might say. And so the thing that got me going, though, was this secrecy, this incredible secrecy that they went to great lengths to create around this meeting. And I thought, this must be really big. And it took me quite a while to discover the full depth of that rabbit hole. And there were several stops along the way. And I thought to myself, oh, my God, this is true? And no, this can't be true. And I'd check it out. And I found out usually from the writings of the people themselves, the conspirators themselves, who had written quite a bit about what they were doing, but it was in documents that wasn't publicly, documents that weren't publicly available. But some of them were, and in the libraries, they had biographies written about them. A lot of history came out of the biographies. Some of them wrote articles for newspapers and magazines at the time, and their memoirs revealed quite a bit. Some of them had family members talking about them in later years, and so forth. So it took a while to piece it all together. But back to your question, it was the secrecy of the meeting that caught my curiosity. And I might add, since I'm on that little section about taking the journey, that the deeper I got into that rabbit hole, the more I realized I didn't know. And the more I realized that the story was so huge that I actually stopped writing twice. I call them my dark moment of the night, my darkest moment of the night, when I just came to the conclusion that, oh my God, I'll never be able to treat this topic adequately. I just don't have it. I don't know enough about it. I don't have the skills. And if I did, nobody would believe it anyway. I stopped writing twice. But fortunately, in retrospect, there was something in the back of my head that says, come on, Griffin, you get this thing done. It needs to be done, even if it's not perfect. Even if it's not even good, you've got to finish what you started. So I went back to the project twice, and fortunately I was able to finish it.
Now that you wrote this in the 90s, or did you write this
Yeah,
before then?
96, I think, was first edition,
First
something
edition
like
of it.
that. It's been over 20 years now. And we've had
Yeah.
5 editions, and
Yep.
we're approaching 100 printings now, to
Wow.
my great amazement, because I thought nobody's going to read this sprick, 600-page book. I didn't even want to read it.
It's a financial classic, is what it is now.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, if anybody hasn't read that, I mean, they know about it. That's for sure. Because I mean, this is really, especially in this space, in the crypto space, because we're all very concerned about the broken money system, and now more so than ever. I mean, you've seen it over the last 4 or 5 years. It's just gone insane. Exactly the things that you said were going to happen have happened,
Yes.
and now here we are in this situation. So, one of the questions that I want to ask you about your research, you call them a cartel, and we know, cartels. They're very well funded. They're very powerful. They're very secretive, and they do work for themselves. I mean, I worked for 30 years as a millwright, so I'm a working stiff, and I was raised and started my career during the days before the internet. So all we did have was the Encyclopedia Britannica that was sitting under the couch at the house, that nobody read, but it was there. So we didn't have education unless you were a book reader, and I hated books too. Like you said, I wasn't a book reader. I was, well, I'm going to go out and work with my hands. That's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm a worker. But the financial education, as I got older, started to become very important. And I know that I watched the great generation, my grandfather and my father, who was, a boomer generation. I watched them both work careers like I did. And, the one had the pension and the good retirement. And then my father's retirement got worse, and it wasn't as easy for him. And now I'm working. I'm getting closer to that retirement age. And I woke up one day and realized that I was going to have to continue working, that I didn't have a pot to piss in, that they had destroyed the money system so bad that I didn't have what they had. And I didn't work any less. In fact, I started looking at the production numbers of productivity in the U.S. workers, and it had gone through the roof. Our productivity had gone through the roof, yet we had less than we'd ever had before, as far as a way of retirement and a way to get out and a way to better our lives as we got older. And then we were all getting sicker, and the medical system was getting messed up. So it's just a long question about what I'm actually asking is, today, what's your feeling, or do you even have a hand finger on the pulse of what the power of these cartels is anymore? Do you see it weakening? Do you see it changing? Do you see any difference from when you started doing your research and from the beginning of this? What's that cartel looking like today?
I'm thinking about how to answer that. I don't want to talk around this topic, but I think, taking the bigger question first, the cartel is more powerful now, in my view, than it ever has been. Okay, we start with that. Now, does that mean that the chances of exposing it or stopping it are less? And I don't think it does, because although the cartel is more powerful and seems to have its control mechanisms in almost every aspect of our lives, the awakening of the public to the nature of the cartel and the evil that it does also is at its highest level than ever before in history. And these two forces are coming to each other at the head, and one or the other is going to break. Now, that's the question. Which one? Will it be the awakening giant, the public opinion, the people of America? And around the world, by the way, this is a problem that's shared by every country in the world. And people are awakening to it. They're powerless right now, but they're scrambling for ways to figure out how you can break the grip of the cartel. I believe that the cartel members are very worried about that. And I think that they're pushing their agenda a little faster than they should have. Had I been the chief conspirator of that group, I would say, hey, boys, just slack off a little bit. The public is asleep. We don't want to wake them up. Oh, it would take a few more years, but we've got them almost in the cage. So don't make too much noise. They're moving in just fine. They'll never wake up. But they decided to move quickly, and now people are waking up, and they've thrown so many balls at us, cannon fire and everything else, everything from terrorism to COVID to 9/11. All of those things are waking people up. So my long-term answer to that question is the power of the cartel is unlimited right now, almost unlimited. But I think it will be broken by public opinion and public action.
So what kind of tools do you think are going to be needed for change to be made? I mean, they've got control of the money. They've got control of the speech because of Citizens United. They can pump as much money into the system as they want and get as much legislation as they want. So what tools are available to the people to combat this, to stop them from doing what they're doing to our money? I mean, as people in crypto, we have a good idea that the tool that we have can do that. I was just wondering what you were thinking a tool would look like, or what would be necessary to try to do that, to try and go against these guys.
It's hard to describe it, and I guess the reason it's hard for me is because we've never seen such a tool. But I think that public opinion and public awareness is the necessary component of that tool. The strongest tool that we have is our numbers. Mm-hmm. We outnumber these people by thousands to one. Now, that may not sound like a lot, especially if, as you said, if they control the courts, the government, the police, the schools, the money, everything, the hospital, the healthcare. What difference does it make? Well, I can't answer that question because I think we're at a turning point in history where we're going to find out what difference it makes. Up until this time, I think it's been pretty clear that history has always been written by, I'll say, 1% of the population. And here's how I see it working. 1% of the population consists of the thought leaders. These are the ones who, for lack of a better name, we'll call them the scholars, the thinkers, the planners, the leaders. The 1% arouses the 3% who are the influencers. These are the people who have following, such as you, for example. You are an influencer, and I am an influencer. And people who have influence over large numbers of people represent about 3% of the population. So there's our 3%. Now, that 3% provide leadership for a total of about 15%, including their own 3. So what we're dealing with is that 15% of any population so far in history has been able to rewrite that history if they were unified. It's certainly true in the American Revolution. 15% approximately of the population was in favor of the revolution. There were about 15% who were loyal to the crown. And the other 70% were in the middle trying to decide, oh dear, what are we going to do? Which side would we be on? And they were waiting to see who was going to win. And they would be on that side. But this is true, I think, universally throughout history. 1%, 3%, and 15% will write history this time around as well. So our task is only not to reach the masses necessarily. The guy next door pushing his lawnmower who couldn't care less about political or economic issues or historical issues, he's out of it. He's going to go whichever way history goes. But the 15% that you and I are interested in are not that kind of. How can they do that? Now, this is where it gets tough. I see it as, first of all, how can they not do it? I don't think they're going to do it by grabbing their muskets and meeting the redcoats at the bridge. I mean,
No.
in those days, it was a question of how many muskets you had.
Yeah.
All of the muskets were pretty much the same. And oh, you got it. Probably
I
got
got
one.
it. Turn the
Yeah.
fan on. Sorry.
It was a question of if you had 10,000 men versus 3,000 men. Well, they've all got the same weapons, so the 10,000 army will probably be victorious, and the 3,000 will probably surrender pretty soon. Whereas today, our enemy, even though they are in the minority, have unbelievably powerful weapons. And if people think that they're going to grab their rifle or their pistol and work against atomic, chemical, electronic weapons, they're mistaken. But
Yeah.
fortunately, that's not where the battle will be fought anyway.
It's
It's
not.
fought in the arenas of politics, political control. It's fought in the arenas of information and that kind of thing.
You're speaking
So,
my language.
yeah, that's really it. And so I have great hopes that people don't wait until there's somebody banging on their door at 3 o'clock in the morning saying, all right, you get into the truck. And they think, oh, you can't do that to me. I got my musket here. I got my rifle here. Oh, of course, I hope people are listening to me out there who have been making that decision. They're going to wait until somebody, because I want them to do something now. Do it now while we still have enough
Yes.
freedom to get organized and to create understanding and swell our ranks. We have to be influencers because the other 70%, even though they're not going to do anything, they do have to support us. So that's our task. I think somewhere in everything I've been talking about around the bush, somewhere in there, we're going to discover a new weapon, which is the power of public opinion. And hopefully, now this is just for Americans now. Anybody overseas might get angry at this, but we call it the old American spirit. And I think it's still alive. And I think we're going to see it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that in my world, everything that you spoke resonated, because I know that a lot of the people out there are now being very educated. The rabbit holes have been exposed, and everybody's been in and out of them and seeing what's really going on. So the emperors have no clothes, and because of the advent of the internet, we've all discovered this thing. I think now we're in that state of shock and surprise and like, wow, this was really going on all these years. And now there's just a lot of chaos, pandemonium. And I think that slowly but surely the people are coming together because of the internet, and we're able to use these tools to get information out and speak just like you did, because you inspired me by saying that, because you nailed it. It's 1% of the thought leaders that put things out there. It's 3% of the influencers that get that information to the people. And it's 15% of the people that have passion and drive and desire. And like you said, that spirit to go out and make change. That's how it's always been. It really is how it's always been.
That really is it. Yes.
And now it makes so much more sense, and it's so much more clear to me now that's what this movement is about. And that's what we've been doing here, is we're trying to gather that 15% so that we can go out and try and combat this stuff.
That's it. Exactly. Now, 15% is doable. In fact, to tell you the truth, I think we've already gone over that number, but now they don't realize that there are others just like them. Many of those people in our 15% group, they think they're alone.
Yes.
So our job is just to find them. And if you run up against some guy that said, this is a bunch of BS or whatever, just say, next, keep moving, because they're out there. They're just waiting for us to bring the truth to them.
Yeah. No. So if you could do anything to fix this, what would that look like to you?
If I could
Other than what you're already doing, if you could do anything, if you could inspire the younger generation here to do anything, what would that look like to you?
Well, other than what I've already said, I think I would want to focus on substance. We talk about liberty and freedom and resistance.
Yeah, big subject.
What does that mean? That's a big picture, isn't it?
Yes.
I don't think we can defend freedom or liberty until we have a pretty good idea of what it is. what makes it possible. Unfortunately, many people think that freedom is merely not being in jail. That's it. Yeah. Well, they're not going to, they'll have no ability to defend freedom because they'll say, well, as long as I'm not in jail, I'm okay. I think what I would ask most for is that everyone, including the young,
Oh, come back, internet. Come back, internet. Okay. We lost Mr. Griffin. Uh-oh. Let's see if we can get him back here. Mr. Griffin, come back to us. Oh, no. Oh, how horrible. Okay. All right, guys. I'm sorry. We're gonna see if Mr. Griffin's internet gets fixed or if he comes back. I'll hold it right here just to see if we. Yeah, who knows who might have shut that off. Oh, look, he completely disappeared. My guess is that man right there could possibly be being watched. I don't know, but we'll see if the YouTube channel goes down. We still up, guys? Everybody still good? We're still up. Okay, so I'm sure he'll try and pop back in, but you know what I'm trying to talk to this gentleman about is, you know, he nailed it. He's talking about the 1% and the 3% and the 15%. Ah, he's back. He's back. Let's see. Let me see if his video's not on. Come on, Mr. Griffin. You got it. There he is.
All right.
There you are. I'm sorry. We had a bad internet connection there. You dropped off.
I saw we lost our internet connection. It might be at my end. But anyway, who knows?
Yeah,
so anyway,
people are our chat room talking about the NSA right
now. Yeah, you never know.
You never know.
But where I was going with all of that is that I think the big issue that people overlook.
Oh, boy.
And I came to the understanding that it was all about knowing the difference between collectivism and individualism. This is the ideological framework. Our enemies, no matter who they are, whether they're raving communists, Nazis, fascists, socialists, progressives, liberals, or whatever they call themselves, whatever we call them, they're all basically, they want the same things we do. They're not all bad people. Some of them are really evil. The ones at the top, I have no truck for them.
10% of them, yeah.
Yeah, most of the people that we have trouble with are true believers that what they are proposing will save mankind from atomic war or hunger or racial bias or something like that. And they want the same things that we do, and we want the same things they do. But their idea and our idea of how to achieve it is different. Now, collectivism is the common ideology to all of those people, regardless, Republican, Democrat. You find collectivists in every cross-section. In fact, all the governments of the world today are solidly collectivist in nature. There's very little difference anymore between the government of the United States, I mean, the thinking and the policies of the government of the United States, and the government of the former Soviet Union, or today, the government of Red China. In fact, as most people know, our diplomats and their diplomats mingle quite freely. They hold conferences and they hug and kiss each other, and they're planning this new world order of collectivism. It's their common ideology. So if we don't know what they believe and what they're striving for and why, and if we don't have our own goals and know what we're striving for and why, we lose. It's going to be just as clear and simple as that. So I've spent a lot of my time trying to sell the idea of individualism and to show how it is so far superior to the ideology of collectivism. Now, if anybody in your program is wondering what I'm talking about, let me try and just put it in focus. I've created some essays on my website about this topic. So Anybody that's really interested can go to freedomforceinternational.org and read some lengthy essays on it. But just for a quick, short overview, collectivism is the idea that the group or the collective is more important than the individual, and that the individual must be sacrificed, if necessary, for the greater good of the greater number. Now, that is the fundamental idea behind all of the collectivist movements. The Nazis believe that, the fascists, the communists, the socialists, all these people that we say are on the left. And there are a lot of people that we even think of on the right that believe that, but they don't want to admit it. And that's because that's all they teach in school. I was taught that in school. I came out thinking, oh, that makes sense. The greater good of the greater number, right? That's democracy. And what I didn't realize is that if you follow that idea all the way to its root, you come to the realization that democracy is a horrible form of government. It's in the pure form. And our founding fathers here in America knew that, and they said so. You can read their papers, and they say democracy has always destroyed itself. And they didn't create a democracy at all. They created what they called a republic. It's important to know the differences between a democracy and a republic. Just to make this a little more understandable, in a democracy, the majority always rules. So to win an election and to do whatever you want to do, all you have to do is just get the vote. You can get the vote easily if you're a demagogue. You can promise voters that they'll get free food, free this, free that, and free everything. Once you get to 51% of the people who are willing to accept something free, you are now king, because you can do whatever you want. And to hell with the minority. I mean, you're lost. If you're 49%, you lose. There's no limitation on your power. But when you start putting limitations on the power of even those who have the majority, now you're talking about a different animal. It's no longer a democracy. It's a republic. And just think for a moment, a lynch mob in action. Now there we have a perfect democracy. There's only one dissenting vote, and he's at the end of the rope. So if you really like the idea of a democracy, you've got to be all for lynch mobs, because that's the ultimate form. So we have to think about these things. Boy, when I came to that realization, it stunned me how stupid I was, how I didn't think it all the way through. So collectivists believe that the group is more important than the individual. Individual is going to be sacrificed. It doesn't make any difference how many, as long as it's the minority, they don't count for anything. And so what do individualists think? Well, individualists believe that the individual is the root of society. In fact, we believe that there is no such thing as a group. That's a shocking statement, no such thing as a group. And the question arises, well, did you ever see a group? The answer is no. You've seen people, individual people, but group is a mathematical concept. It's a concept in the brain. It's an abstraction. It's like the number 7. Have you ever seen 7? No. You've seen 7 people maybe, or 7 trees, but you've never seen 7. So that's where group fits. It's an abstraction. And since it's an abstraction, it doesn't really exist. It's not a tangible thing. A non-tangible thing cannot have rights that are superior to humans. The human society starts with the individual. And the best way to provide the greater good for the greater number, and I'm all for that, but the best way to provide that is by putting the individual's rights uppermost. Under such a society as we used to have, that is the greater good for the greater number, because the greater number is always made up of individuals. So that's the starting point for this discussion. We have to know what we're fighting for and what we believe in, and that'll strengthen our conviction. And frankly, nothing like this has ever before happened in history. Even when our founding fathers drafted our Constitution, they created a republic, and they were supporting individualism without really using the word. I wish they had. It would have been much easier. but they used the word government. And so we were born into a system in which we were asked in school to say, well, what kind of a government do we want? It's a terrible question because we don't want government at all. What's the purpose of a government? It's to govern. Anybody here want to be governed? No, no, we don't want to be governed. What do we want our bureaucracy to do, our state to do? We want to be protected. We want what we now call the government to protect us against foreign invaders, against crime, corruption, fraud, things like that, theft of personal property. So we should be calling this state not a government, but a protectorate. Now, if we had done that in the beginning, and the school classroom begins with what kind of a government should we have, it would start with the words, what kind of a protectorate should we have? And then the discussion would be fruitful. Okay, I could go on a lot on this, but you asked me to say, what is my goal? What would be what the thing I would like to see the most? I would like to see more and more people, perhaps 15%, understand the difference between collectivism and individualism.
Okay. I get it. And, but giving more freedoms and more power, more control to the individual is probably what that's going to look like. I think that,
well, it's not necessarily giving freedom to them. They've already got it. The purpose of the state is to protect those freedoms. You understand what I'm trying to say is that we've got those freedoms, but we need to protect them. If we're not, we can't protect them, somebody will take them from us. So that's what we want the state to do. And so it's to preserve our freedoms. In fact, our Constitution or the Declaration of Independence even says so. One in the course of human events, et cetera, et cetera. And it says in plain terms, the purpose of the state is to protect these inalienable rights, not to grant them. It's not the purpose of the state to grant them. State is just nothing but people. It's a group. That's another thing. The state doesn't exist. It's just people. Corporations don't exist. They're just contracts on a piece of paper agreed to by people. Governments don't exist. They're just bureaucrats, people. And that's a part of the problem there, because sometimes people can hide behind this facade of the corporate law or their government agents, and therefore they cannot be punished for crimes, et cetera, et cetera.
All of the things that you're speaking are very intriguing, because crypto and blockchain technology are that tool to take back that power to the individual and get those, not those freedoms, but to protect those freedoms by taking it away from human hands and putting it in to the power of what we call the centralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, where you're creating contracts, and instead of human beings being in charge of those contracts, you have actual technology handling those contracts. Just like the currency itself can be controlled by a contract, by programming it to do the right thing versus letting human hands get involved and start to change and manipulate and move it around. That's where I see the marriage of the wisdom that you're bringing and the information that you're bringing and what the blockchain is bringing. And it's coming to maturity. It was a concept, Bitcoin was a concept. It proved that you can make a transaction peer-to-peer securely outside of the banking system, outside of that cartel. And it did it. It didn't do it well. It had problems and issues, but it just proved that concept. And then the next thing was Ethereum and the smart contracts, and it proved another concept that you can actually program these things to do the right thing versus human beings touching it. And it was broken also. So the next generation of cryptocurrencies are coming, and blockchain technology is coming, and these tools are being handed to the people immutably, meaning that nobody else can change them and the governments aren't in control of them, which is really exciting to me, because I'm hearing you speak, and I'm hearing you speak through all of these years of wisdom, and I'm seeing the tools being developed right before my eyes that can actually change this. So I'm very excited for the future, and hearing you is just reiterating it for me that we are on the right track, that there is a path here, and there are tools that are becoming available that are going to help to fix this. The one last thing that I wanted to kind of talk to you before we get closing here is I want your take on inflation so bad, because you're so good at it and you understand it so well. Inflation is like the mess that we're in right now. It's the swamp that we're in as far as our currencies go globally. And it's always like the death nail of, there's been so many umpteen thousands of different currencies that have been in the world, and they've all failed at one point or another. And here we have this almighty dollar that has done so well. And now we're seeing the inflation going absolutely crazy. And I want your take on inflation, a brief synopsis to everybody on inflation and what it's doing right now and what that means and what's happening.
Okay, well, I'm going to guess that your audience is very aware of what inflation really is.
They are. They are pretty aware.
So we don't need to go into that. In case somebody's listening in that doesn't really understand it, I'll just summarize it by saying inflation is a phenomenon in which prices do not go up, but the value of the purchasing unit, the dollar, goes down. And the resulting phenomenon is that we see the numbers getting larger and larger as prices on goods and services. But the real prices in terms of value, don't change much. It's just that the value of the dollar is going down. So once you understand that you didn't make a lot of money when you bought a house, as I did for, let's see, bought it for $13,500 years and years ago. And I don't know what it's worth today, but a heck of a lot more than that. But that doesn't mean that my house is any more valuable than then, because in those days I could buy a candy bar for a nickel, and a Coca-Cola for a nickel and so forth. So it's just a question. My house today is probably worth about the same number of hamburgers that it was back when I bought it. So you have to understand that, because it gets confusing otherwise. So, all right. So and inflation is a way by which the Federal Reserve System and other central banks around the world are able to confiscate the private wealth of all the citizens. And they do so in quiet increments, steady stealth, 1.5%, 2.5% a year, until finally, when a person has worked all of his life, and if he put all of his life savings into money or dollars, in our case, he reaches my age, he's got a lot of numbers, but it doesn't buy very much. He'd have been better off investing in some kind of hard assets, like a warehouse of cheap white wine or something like that, that he could use to buy things with. So it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible phenomenon at many levels. The worst one, I think, is that people are being robbed and they don't even know it. So now my take on that is, so that's the phenomenon we're talking about, is that you said it very well. It's out of control now. It's been going on from the day the Federal Reserve System was created, but it's been increments of 1.5% to 2.5%, where nobody really feels it so suddenly. But it's really roaring like Niagara Falls. And that tells us something. That tells me, at least, that the central bankers don't care anymore. They're not trying to conceal it. I think what they're trying to do is get the last hurrah out of it before it's destroyed. I think that what they're planning on is an international currency. They're planning on a social credit system where you don't even use currency. You use little plastic cards that have numbers on it, and those numbers are determined by how obedient you are to the central control masters, to the elitists. If you are a person like myself, for example, I'm sure my social credit card, if I ever get one at all, will probably have a bunch of zeros on it. I won't be able to buy anything with it, and that's going to be the money of the future. So Yeah, I think what they're trying to do now is to create such a inflationary blizzard so that people will be so alarmed that they'll be grateful because they don't understand. They'll be grateful for a new system. The new system is what they really want. So I think they're in a state of destroying the old system right now. And at the rate they're going, it won't take very long to finish that job.
Interesting. Very, very interesting, because that's one of the things that we in the crypto space have been, really trying to focus on a solution to is the inflation and the inflation rate, and how that is affect. I mean, all of these cryptos inflate. Some of them actually they launch and then they deflate or whatever. But the different models that they've been playing around with, because they can program these things, I guess the programming is making cryptocurrencies now to where they can actually inflate at certain rates and continue to do so at a regular basis without any human being touching, affecting, or changing it. Do you think that inflation is necessary, or should it have been fixed and not ever happened as far as a monetary system goes? What's your take on that? If you were to like have a currency, I know you're talking about this digital dollar or whatever they may be trying to come up with and create this global thing with, but if you had a currency, and you could program it to inflate how you wanted it to, what would that look like?
Well, you threw me a curve when you said it could inflate at the rate that I would like to see it. I would not like to see any inflation in a currency. It's supposed to be stable. And
so does that mean that it's supposed to be fixed to something like the gold reserve, or
no,
is that your
it's not
take?
supposed to be fixed to anything.
Okay. So they're just supposed to print a certain amount of it, and that's supposed to what exists throughout time, or
no,
okay.
no, it's not. You don't print it. It's got to consist of something of intrinsic value, such as gold or silver. We're back to that again. If they had printed money, that's the problem. They're printing it today. So it's up to a committee to decide, well, how many billion do we print today? Well, let's be conservative and only print 99 billion today. You know, that's the problem. And when you leave it up to human judgment, somewhere along the line, fraud is going to slip into it.
Yeah.
But if you make money something which is intrinsically valuable, like in prison, cigarettes are a good form of money. All right, you don't print them, but you have to buy them with fiat money or something. In World War II, when the GIs were overseas in Europe, they had cigarettes, they had rations. That was good money, and people would accept it in exchange for something. Money is merely a form of barter, but it's for an intermediary. It's a what's the word? I guess intermediary is the best word. With barter, you trade one thing for another, and that's the end of it. But with money, you use the money as an intermediary between what you give and what you get. And let's just say, for example, I've got a piano and I'm moving out and I have no place to put my piano anymore. So I will trade it for something that I know I can trade again for money. I would be willing to, maybe somebody had a Model T car, for example, in good shape. So yeah, take my piano, I'll take the Model T. And, but I don't really want the Model T that much. It's just that I know that I can pass it on to somebody else and get what I really want. So money is an intermediary on barter. And it's important to understand that. So I think money should be something of intrinsic value, something that would be useful and people would want, even if it were not money. That's the secret right there.
So I guess my question really was this, and maybe even be more simpler. If all of the money, if they were able to wipe the slate clean and get rid of all the money and everything, what would Ed Griffin's idea of money look like?
Oh, I would go back to the traditional, and that's the gold and silver. There's always a use for that. People will always want gold and silver. It's used in industry, used in jewelry.
So
And
you would tie the value to dollars either
no,
digitally
no, I wouldn't tie it.
or I'm sorry, to the gold. I mean,
I'd let the market decide that. I'd say, I've got an ounce of silver here or gold. What do you got to swap it with? And if a million or 150, if 300 million people were doing that, we would know what the value of that gold was. It'd be worth, or that silver piece would be worth 19 hamburgers, or let's say, because that you can go into any hamburger store and you get 19 hamburgers for a silver dollar, so-called, or an ounce of silver. The market would decide its value. We wouldn't have a committee doing it. And its value might fluctuate a little bit, but the American dollar used to be that way. We started off, it was gold or silver, and the pieces of paper were merely receipts. You could take it to the mint and turn in your receipt and get the gold and silver. So it merely was a representation of gold or silver. It was the same as carrying the gold or silver in your pocket, but more convenient until they broke the dollar away from gold and silver. And then it was just a piece of paper. But as long as the dollar was backed by gold or silver, it was the same as gold and silver. And there was virtually or practically no inflation at all for a long, long period of time, because it took human effort to produce the gold and silver, just like it takes human effort to produce everything you buy with gold and silver, services and products. So when you're exchanging human effort for human effort, it's a self-regulating mechanism, and the market will determine its value, and no wise committee can match it.
Well, you've without knowing it, you've made the argument for blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies with everything that you've said, because that's exactly what's coming. That's exactly what this is doing. And there's still a lot to be seen. There's a lot to be learned as far as the emerging technologies coming out and how this is going to affect the world. And then the power struggle is, I think, going to be the biggest deal for all of us, because like you said, that cartel is very strong, very wealthy, and has a lot of power in the legislative branches. So it's going to be a tough battle, I think, to try and fight this and make change. But everything that you said resonates with all of us, and we all love you for that. So thanks for coming on and hanging out with us. We appreciate you.
You know,
is there anything else you want to say and talk about your expo that you have in July and the Red Pill Expo?
Preface it, but I enjoy talking to people that know what's going on in the world, so you can speak freely without having to worry about shocking people to death. You know, you can just say it the way it is.
You taught all of us, man. We're basically all your children here. Everybody in the chat room is like, he woke me the first time. I went down my first rabbit hole with Mr. Griffin. So these are your people here. They all love you. I know you can't see the chat room, but the chat room is just, everything is just one comment after another about how you've opened their eyes, and your book was the first one they read to get down into the rabbit hole and all that good stuff. So you're revered in this community. That's for sure.
Oh, well, that's great. I feel good about that. So, well, you mentioned the Red Pill project. Yep. Yeah, the Red Pill project is an outgrowth of my goal of trying to find that 15%. We've already got a hardcore of, 3%. But 3% can't do it. We need that's support of 15%. The people that know that something is wrong, they may not be quite aware of how deep the rabbit hole goes and all that, but they know there is one. And so we want to show them the rabbit hole and enlighten them. And mostly of all, we want to show them that they're not alone. So we're trying to bring people together to meet with each other, eyeball to eyeball, not on the video. Nothing wrong with this, but when you're trying to build a movement, you've got to have people in your community. You've got to have lunch with them, dinner with them, coffee with them, talk to them, get to know them, so you can trust them and rely on them, and they will get to trust you. Then you can start designing programs in your local community to take your community back. Everyone wants to start with, who are you going to vote for president? Oh my! By the time the ballot gets out there and there's presidential candidate on it, the war is over. You've got to start at your local community, in your own backyard. Make sure that the candidates that are running for the board of supervisors in your county are good people. Make sure that you've got the right sheriff, things like that, the board of education. And that can be done with a relatively small number of people in a local community. And so with that thought in mind, we created Red Pill Expo, which is a big public event. We're putting it on twice a year. And the next event is coming up on July 9 and 10 in Indianapolis, Indiana. And it looks like it's going to be a real rip-roaring event. This is where people come together. They hear speakers who really explain red pills that maybe they hadn't even thought about. And also they meet each other, and they go out with new friends, and they go out and they become part of what we call our coalition. The coalition is international in scope. We always have people from other countries there. It's not a patriotic American salute the American flag type of meeting. It's not a religious meeting. It's no. There are plenty of groups that do those things. Ours is an international coalition of people who know the difference between collectivism and individualism, and who want to do something to make sure that individualism survives and becomes the ruling ideology of the future. So we have the Red Pill Expo as the first step, and then the next step is the Red Pill University, and that's really where the action takes place. So I don't know what's more to say except Red Pill University, we're just beginning to build campuses now, and we want at least one campus of maybe 15 or 25 people in every county. And for larger counties, of course, they can be larger campuses or break down into smaller ones. We've already tested the idea, and it works. You'd be surprised how few people, if they know what they're doing and get together and put forth a little bit of effort, they can make a big difference in local politics. And that's where it has to happen. We don't want to have to shoot it out at OK Corral. We want to win back our country the way we lost it, which is in the political structure.
Yep, you're speaking my language, sir.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So that's in the nutshell what Red Pill University and Red Pill Expo is all about. So if you want more information, or anybody of your listeners, just come to redpilluniversity.org or redpillexpo.org, see what our upcoming program is going to look like, and then spend a little time splashing around on the site. And I think your readers and your followers are going to like what they see.
Right on. All right, everybody. You see the link down there, Red Pill Expo. That's for the Indianapolis event in July. And then Red Pill University, if you want to go and get some education. All right, guys. Thank you so much, Mr. Griffin, for coming on to the show. I appreciate you so much. And I'm hoping you're feeling better. I had heard about your illness, and I hope all is going well. And you make an even speedier recovery and get back out there and get some good work done.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. You have a good one. Well, maybe we'll get to have you on again sometime.
Okay. Well, it's good to be among the 3%.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that.
All right.
All right. Have a good one. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Bye, everybody.
See you.